Hi guys, welcome to Learn with W3 Schools, and my name is Dr. Zeeshan Bhatti. Today we're going to talk about DOM manipulation in JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is again absolutely powerful, but what makes JavaScript powerful is called DOM manipulation or the DOM document object model. Without understanding how DOM works, you can never or learn and understand what JavaScript is and what actually is the actual power of JavaScript. So understanding DOM is absolutely imperative to anybody who is actually going into JavaScript and learning programming using JavaScript for web development or full stack development. Is in fact this DOM manipulation carries from JavaScript to jQuery to React to Node.js. Everything you do after JavaScript, actually you will be using this DOM manipulation. And you will need to understand what exactly is this object notation that we use inside JavaScript. So without further ado, let's begin. My name is again Dr. Zishan, just told you, right? But don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more about programming and JavaScript because I post videos regularly, right? So please do subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what you think and what you like to study and how this video is. Do that. Okay, let's begin now. Document object model. DOM actually stands for document, object, and model, meaning that it actually means that entire website that you view is basically a document inside an object. Okay, and then it compasses a complete model that you use it. Now what do we these three things means, I will explain in a moment as we go along. But in simple sense, we say that hey, whenever you're working with any document, any Java web page, everything inside the web page is considered as a document. Then that document can be referred using the object notation, which then has a specific model by which you can actually refer to this object. Okay, so everything inside your web page you do is based on this document object model. What is the document object model, or how does this work? With the HTML DOM is a standard object model. By object means that everything inside the HTML document is considered as an object. That's what the model basically means, and it has a specific structure. I will explain that in next slide. So whenever we're working with HTML web page programming, every HTML content is actually considered as an object. That's how it works. And programming interface for HTML, meaning that using this mod object we program and access the entire interface. Okay, so this object notation is absolutely important in JavaScript. It defines that the HTML elements as objects. So every HTML object is actually element is actually considered as an object in JavaScript. The properties, the methods, the events, all of these are accessible, being able to modify, change them using the JavaScript object. Okay, so that's where the actual power comes into play. So when we talk about an HTML document, we say that everything inside the HTML, the elements that are there are then considered as objects. Those objects are then being able to access all the major properties of your document with the properties attributes, the methods that access all elements, and even the events. You can control everything using this object notation. So in other words, we say that HTML DOM is a standard for how to read the data, how to manipulate or change or update the data, how to add new data in your HTML document using JavaScript, and how even to delete the HTML elements. So you can perform all these major operations on your HTML using JavaScript. That's why this DOM is so useful, because using the DOM, you are able to control not only the elements, their properties, methods, events. Control means do every single thing. This document object model, how do we manipulate it? It basically represents your HTML document as a tree. Okay, what it means is that it considers your HTML document as a tree. So when you create an HTML document, for example, I have a simple div HTML, then I specify the attribute example, and then we have an HTML content. So when we use the JavaScript, inside the script tag, we use this document object. So this is where it comes into play. So literally this HTML behaves as a document object, meaning that now because I have this object is able to access my HTML. So I tell it, hey, inside this HTML, get me an element by ID. So find an element that has an ID called example. So this element ID is actually matched here. So using this object, we use a method called get element by ID. It's a default method present inside this document. and we provided an ID name, meaning that I have an ID inside my HTML document, read that HTML ID, then dot text content, which basically means that whatever content is there, read that content, is equals to, we use an assignment operator and change the content. So now when you execute it, you actually will be printing hello DOM. So this is what actually it means. So JavaScript allows us to interact with and manipulate the DOM to create dynamic web pages. So through this JavaScript, I'm able to change the content, okay, meaning that I'm able to interact with the content, I'm able to manipulate it, change it by using this main document object. That's what document object model means. So how does this DOM work? You will often hear that the DOM being referred to as the DOM tree, which consists of a tree object called nodes. So everything inside the tree is considered as a node. Okay, so this document as a whole object is basically considered as a tree. Inside the tree, everything is considered as a node. What do we mean by node? So the elements that we have, in this case, we have this div becomes a node. Then we have this attribute, the attribute becomes a node. Then we have this text becomes a node. So there are three nodes with respect to DOM. In perspective of DOM, there are three nodes inside this HTML document. We have a div, we have a property or an attribute, and we have a text. So this is what it is referring to, that when we talk about it, everything inside this tree is considered as a node. So we have an element node, we have an attribute node, and we have a text node. So we understand the tree, or we go inside the document. So this becomes our parent root node. Okay, this is what we call our root node is. So inside the root node, we have the root element called HTML. So this becomes the second HTML tag. Okay, so this is known as, again, the element node here, this one. Then inside this element tag, we know every HTML document needs to have head tag and element body. So even these are becoming the branches of the HTML. So we have a head and we have a body. This is the two primary nodes that every HTML document tends to have. So if I go inside the head, every head can have a title. The title will have a text. Okay, so this again becomes an element, and the text becomes its text node. If I go inside the body now has multiple attributes or multiple elements, multiple texts. So it starts with an element. So for example, if I have h1 is an element, anchor tag is an element, paragraph, table, every tag that you create inside the body is automatically part of this document model. You don't need to do anything. It's by default part of that. Then every element has something called attributes, which again are considered as nodes because you can access this node, because everything is inside the document. Because we have a document object, now this document object is able to access every single thing in our document, even the text, even the model. So this is the whole tree that we define. This whole tree is what makes document object model work, because everything is considered as a tree that resides inside the main document object, and then you can manipulate it. What does that all mean? It means that it gives JavaScript immense power. Okay, so the real JavaScript power actually means that because we have now considered everything inside HTML as a document object, and now Java has that document object, it has that one powering to rule them all. So the JavaScript, once it has this document, can change all HTML elements in your web page. So you can change everything inside element, every element you can change. JavaScript can change all the HTML attributes of each element. No matter which element you are using, you can access that element and you can change their attributes. For example, image has an src attribute. Anchor tag has an href attribute. Similarly, there are many attributes that we can work with. You can change any attribute of any tag. JavaScript can even change the CSS styles. That's one major thing. So using JavaScript on click buttons, we can change the styles. JavaScript can remove existing HTML elements and attributes as well. So it has that power to remove HTML completely. JavaScript can add new elements as well. So even though you have not defined an HTML in your main document, you can add new element through JavaScript, which will become part of your document. That's, again, as I said, that's powerful thing is DOM. JavaScript can react to existing HTML events. Again, the events are there. We can control existing event, define new events, control the entire events based on our DOM model. JavaScript can create HTML events as well. So once we are able to do everything, obviously we are also able to create new events based on what tags we have and what we content we are writing. So this is what we say. So once you understand that, okay, this is DOM, we have HTML, root, tag, body, head, paragraph, everything actually is a child of the document object, then we can easily do anything with those things. So how do we do those changes? How do we control all that thing? Okay, so the basic thing is we read certain methods, we use certain methods to manipulate that content inside the document object. So this is our main document object. Inside the document, there are some methods. Again, there are many other methods. There are few methods I've listed here. For example, get element by ID, which means find me an element that has an ID, specific ID. Then I can have get element by a tag name, which means that return the node that has a specific tag name. For example, paragraph, anchor tag, a tag, div tag, heading tag. You can get an element, read an element using the tag name itself. You can create an element using a method called create element. You can create a text node by using a method called create text node for a particular element. You can even create attribute and add an attribute to a tag already defined. You can add event listener to listen to a particular event that occurs inside your document. And there are many other modes. This is just a brief idea. So we use these methods with the document object to access it. Don't worry, I will show you a few examples as we go along. Then what do we mean by node? How do we manipulate and play with the nodes? Okay, so you can use a method called append child node that appends a child node to an existing node in your tree structure, or that meaning existing node inside your paragraph. So you already have a paragraph tag and you want to add a bold tag inside it as a child node. You can do that. You already have a div tag. You want to add another component inside the inside a child node inside the div tag. Or for example, you have a table row table. You want to add another row to it. So add another child. You can append a child using the method called append child. Provide a node to it. Capiche. You can similarly remove a child. You want to remove a row from a main table. You can ask, hey, remove the child. You have a div and it has child nodes inside it. You want to remove it. You can do that. Has child nodes. Again, this will inquire and return true if the node has any child nodes. You can even search for a child node. So it returns a node list of elements, child nodes. So it will return all the child nodes that exist inside an element. So if you want to know, hey, how many rows are there in the table, you can use child nodes and it will tell you that how many child TR nodes are there. Similarly, you can find any number of elements inside a parent node. Okay. And then itself, you want to find out parent node. Hey, I have a table row, or who is the parent of it? Is there any other div above the parent or any other main div tag that's working? So using the parent node method, you can find the parent nodes as well. Insert before new and existing. So you can even insert new node as a child node before an existing node. So you can specify where you want to insert a new node as well. You just provide the new node name and an existing node name that before this, I want to know that. Again, what is nodes? Remember, everything is node here. So element is a node, attribute is a node, text is a node. So you just need to be understanding that everything I do is basically a node, and then we can control that. Similarly, you have events. You have a mouse event, you have keyboard events, you have a form event. You can say, hey, on click, when mouse on clicks, what I'm supposed to do, mouse over, mouse out means when mouse cursor moves over an element and it leaves an element. These are two different events. I can even control that. I can have an on change, on focus, on blur, on input inside a form. So if I have a form, I can use these various events to control the form using JavaScript DOM. Even on a keyboard, I can control the key down event, key on, key up, on key press as well. Okay, so if you user presses a key, that's a key down. As soon as the key is released, that's key up. Just the normal press is basically a key press. So you can control see all these events using a simple DOM models. So you have a keyboard dot on key down. You can do mouse on double click. You can do form events as well. So let's get into a few examples and see. So how do we access element by an ID using this DOM model? Okay, so we to access it, the method is document dot get element by ID, as I said, and then we provided an ID name. So the HTML for it, it would be, for example, we have an HTML node called div. We use an ID attribute. Again, this behaves as a node, but I'm now calling it an attribute because with respect to HTML, we call it an attribute. So we say, hey, I have a div tag. It has an ID called header, and I provide some content here. Then we go inside the JavaScript and we tell it that, hey, let Declare a variable header. Again, this is now up to your programming skill, how you want to do that. I'm just going to show you one common example as we go. So we say, hey, this is the main thing, document. This is the document object that we actually are going to refer to. So this document, go inside this HTML document, find me an element by ID called header. So this is ID here, which actually will be referred to this thing. So that's why ID is important here, because only then JavaScript will be able to find it. If there is no ID, then we will find an user method called, I just mentioned it, get element by tag name. Yeah. But that would also mean that there can be many tags having the same name. So there's always a confusion. A standard pro tip, use ID to find an element. It's the best thing to do and easiest, and it avoids many pitfalls and complications within JavaScript. So once we have it, what this document.getElementID will return, it will return this div tag. So this whole operation will return a div tag which is actually saved inside this header. So now we say, hey, this header contains this div tag. So I say now go inside this header which we just created. With this header now contains this whole div tag that was returned. Go inside this div tag, text content dot is a connection operator that connects an object to its value. So we say, hey, inside this header there is a text content, change it to hello students. So now when we execute it, it's going to print hello students to us instead of welcome. Okay, wonderful. So this is how we change an element using or access an element using JavaScript with the document model. Similarly, you can even change the style of it. So once you have an header, for example, I have this div tag, I can say, hey, header dot style dot color is equals to red. So now this style is actually, the attribute that we use inside HTML to define inline CSS. So we are defining and changing inline CSS. Dot color becomes the CSS property. So this is now CSS property. This is what we say inline CSS style. So coming from HTML, this will actually meaning the tag. So we say tag inline CSS style property, change the color dot CSS. Change dot color, which is actually the CSS, is equal to red. Similarly, any CSS property you can use here and you can change using this same signature. Very full. So that's how you access and change the content. Similarly, accessing elements using the selectors. So if you want to use a selector, how do we do that? This standard JavaScript code is we use again the document, we say query selector. Query selector will allow us to use the query, this selector attribute. So we say, for example, we have a HTML called paragraph. We provide a class intro, and then we define an introductions. So now instead of an ID, we are using something called class. This means that I have a different selector. So instead of an ID, find element by ID. If you are using class, again, okay, no problem. But now we use something called query selector, and we use dot intro. This basically means that I'm now looking for a class called intro. So this will again do the exactly same thing. This will find an element that has dot intro inside it, which is again this dot intro. So dot here is actually referring to class. Once we have this element, then we use the same thing. Hey, go inside the intro that we just got, change its text content and update it. Similarly, we can even say, hey, additionally, we can also ask the document query selector hash header. Okay, so hash header. So for example, if you have a class, you can even access it using the hash as well. And then we say change its style, change its font size to 25. Again, inline CSS, again the CSS property and the CSS properties value. So you can use query selector for this one as well. A quick pro tip, whenever we're trying to access an element, we always prefer this thing. Okay, we always try to use this guy here instead of using this. Again, let me erase all this crap. Instead of using the class, in my again opinion, the best thing we can do is, or the standard approach is, we use this ID operator. This is the best thing. This is the most easiest and a standard convention during the coding. Class intro, yes, it's valid, but see, this dot always confuses it. This hash always confuses many things. Typically, class we use with CSS. So here, the rule of thumb or the tip is that if you are using ID, we use it with our JavaScript. If there is a class, class is usually used with CSS. That's why, because if you are into CSS, if you've already done CSS, you know that every class is accessed by the dot class name. Okay, so we use this dot notation in CSS, and similarly hash as well for accessing the ID. So it's always better to use and understand that, hey, if I'm accessing through JavaScript, let me use the ID. If I'm accessing CSS, let me use the class name. Just, segregates two different things. Anyway, choices you up to you. Creating a new element. So how do we create a new element? To create it, again, we mentioned the method already. We use a create element method and we provide the tag name. This is the standard syntax of creating it. We use, as we say, hey, go inside my document, create an element, and we provide a tag name. So to do that, we go and we say let new div is equals to document. So I have again document object. This will refer to my current document. We say create an element inside this new document called div. So it will create a new div and assign that div to a variable here. Then we say this new div dot text content, whatever we want to print inside this content here. This can be a simple text. This can be a further another div tag as well. Or so we can have another content here inside this div tag as long as inside the inverted quotations. So anything you write inside the inverted quotations will be actually part of this div. Okay, so you can even write another HTML content inside this tab. It can be a complete table, complete HTML page, which you meaning that when I have I create a new div and I can insert a complete new page content using my JavaScript. So this can be any content here that you want to put. So we can say go inside this new div, text content means whatever is inside the content, change it. Okay, and then we append the element. So we add this element to the web page. So we go inside again the document. We say inside the document, find me the body, which is again the main body tag of the content. Append child new div. So we created a new div, but to now add to this, we use this thing called new div. Okay, using the append child new div. So it will append this new div at the end of the tag as a new tag. Okay, so want that thing. Now additionally, you can create a button as well and add that. So for example, if you say hey document dot create element button, like I said, any content of HTML you can create, even a button. You create a new button, you assign it to a variable called button. Then you can say button dot set content, change its content to click me. Then you can say hey document, go inside the main body tag. Inside the body tag, append this child called button, which is actually this new button. So this new button tag will be appended. Yeah. Similarly, you can append any content inside HTML using a JavaScript. Now see the power. So once you have a JavaScript, you can add anything inside your things. How do we modify an element? Well, very simple. Same thing. So we use something called an element dot text content and update the content. So we can say changing style. We can use an element dot style. Again, this becomes our inline CSS attribute, and then we use the CSS background color is equals to this. Now again, what is this element? This element is again these things that we are calling here document dot selector intro. Find me this intro, or we can say hey document dot element by ID header. So now this header is there. So whatever element you are accessing, whatever element you have got, you can go and change its content. You can change its style. You can set its attribute as well. So you can say, hey, update an attribute, element, set attribute, class to highlight. Or for example, H reference to a new path. Okay. Or SRC for an image. And then you can change it to a new image. So if I click on a button, it changes an image. I can just simply say, hey, update an element's SRC attribute to this new path now. And again, options are limitless, whatever you want to do. So you can change an attribute using the set attribute method. You can change the CSS using the style and then the CSS property name and its value, or it's just simply text content within it. That's how we modify the elements within our JavaScript. Removing an element finally. Okay, so again, this becomes important, removing elements dynamically. So if you have a page that user needs to select one thing, hey, select image A or image B. If it selects image B, I want to hide the image A because user has selected the image B. So how do we get rid of that image of a selected option A, option B? We want to remove the other options that user has not selected. So we use method called remove. So we again go say, hey, find me an element by ID, by class name, by tag name, whatever you want. Once you have an element, remove it. Simple as that. So we can say, hey, document dot get element by ID to remove. So whichever element you want to remove, you need its ID. You get that element by using the document dot get element by ID, and you then save it inside the variable. And then you can say element dot remove. So what this will do, it will simply remove that element from the web page. The literally element will be gone. Additionally, you can remove a child nodes as well. So you can say, hey, go inside the document, get me an element by ID called a container. Then we can say, hey, assign it to my parent. Then we can say document dot get element by ID the child element. You can find and assign it to a child, and then you can go inside my parent node dot remove my child. So you can give it the child. So for example, if you have a parent node, for example, a div tag. Okay, if I have a div, uh, all gone. So let me rewrite. So for example, if I have a div, okay, backslash div, inside it I have a paragraph. Now this becomes my child node. So if I just want to remove a child node inside a thing, I basically use this. So I first find the parent container, then I go and find the child container and access it. Okay. So building a dynamic to-do list. Let's see a real world example of how we can use this DOM approach to build a dynamic to-do list. Now, again, this is not a full-fledged professional. I'm just going to give you a simple demo. How do we add in elements and how we can modify them? Okay. So for example, we first build an HTML, we create a div, and then we call it an ID to do container. This becomes my parent node. Inside it, I have an input. Okay, an input field that has an ID called to do input, the text that we input, and then we have a button called ID add to do. So it will add an element. So very simple approach. And then we create an unordered list where each element that we add here will be inserted inside this list. So we will have one item, we will have second item, we have third item. To do that, as soon as I click on a button, I need to perform certain actions. So that actions are not going to be performed using JavaScript. So we say, hey, document dot get element by ID add to do. So find me this add to do button first here. So this will be my button now. So see, I read the value of a button. Then I add an event listener to it. So I said button dot add event listener, click, and when a user clicks on this button, perform this, execute this function. Okay, so this whole operations will be performed when user performs this click event. We have add event listener will add an event to this button. So see, adding an event to a button as well. So using JavaScript, I'm adding an event. So whenever I click on this button, this JavaScript will read the event, and then this event will be executed based on the if it's click event. Okay, so if it's a click event, this event will be executed. Once the event is executed, it will execute this runtime function. So we declare a runtime function without a name as a part of its activity, block start, block close, a simple JavaScript. Then we can say, hey, input, get me an element to do input. So whatever user has entered in their input field, read that element first. Then I can say let new item, go inside document, create an element list item. So inside this unordered list, I want to create each list item. So we create this list item. Then we can say new item, this new item that we have just created, dot text content, change its list content to input dot value. So whatever input we have here, dot value, whatever text we entered here, read its value and assign it to this new item. And then simply we find the to-do list item and append the child. Very easy. Okay, so see this how we can easily manipulate and create complex websites using simple JavaScript. In this case, we create a container, we added a text field, we added a button, we added an empty unordered list without any child nodes. So we first read the button. When the button is clicked, we added an event listener to it. Once the event listener means that when I click on it, it needs to perform certain function. The function is, hey, read the text. Okay, then read this unordered list and then create a new list item element inside it. So every time user clicks on a button, read the text, create a new list item, then append that list item inside this child. Simple logic. So using a simplest JavaScript, we can create a very easy and basic to-do list. Understand? I hope you do. Okay. So finally, the key takeaway: the DOM manipulation transforms static pages into dynamic. Essential methods for accessing elements is get element by ID or query selector. The methods for creating are create elements or an append child. Modifying, we use text content, style, or set attributes method. And to remove, we use the remove content method. Okay, so this is whole basic DOM manipulation in a nutshell. Okay, so I hope you understand a lot of things. So this concludes this session of JavaScript DOM. And let me know what examples you create using the JavaScript DOM and what are you currently working on. what problems you are having, so we can discuss. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a comment, and if possible, do share it with your friends. And also check out these cool videos on JavaScript and other courses on my channel. This is Dr. Zishan signing off.